off we go. First of all, happy May the 4th, happy Star Wars Day to you, Eric. Are
Yeah,
you
there
wearing a
we
Star
go.
Wars shirt?
Star Wars shirt.
And we have a special guest who's joining us. If I try and do this seamlessly, I don't think I will be able to because I just clicked off my screen. But hello.
Hi, Grogu. How's it going, buddy?
It's good. I think it's good. I've lost the Grogu. I put Grogu at the bottom, but welcome to the Keys database. I would do the whole thing. But yeah, Grogu's gonna come chill behind me, just in honor of Star Wars Day. There we go. But welcome, Eric. How's it going? How's your morning going?
It's going great, but don't ask Grogu to tell you this is the way because he's not very good at that. It's an area of opportunity.
I'm not gonna lie, guys.
Look it up
I'm not
later.
Star Wars.
See what I mean?
Yeah, I'm a Marvel. We can see behind me. I'm a Marvel person. There's enough of that. I'm a Harry Potter person. Star Wars over my head. I also tried to do something and I said Star Trek this morning. My friends were like, "Don't say that. It's Star Wars." And I was like, "I'm so sorry. Like, I feel like such a bad nerd." But yeah. All right, let's get into it. So welcome everyone to the Keys to AWS Optimization, the show where we share stories, concepts, and solutions to help you unlock your spend at AWS. My name is Stephanie Gooch, and I'm a Senior Optimization SA in the Optics team at AWS. And today I have Eric, who I've known for many years, and we're going to be talking about lessons learned from a FinOps practitioner. So if you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. We want to know your questions. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, put any comments below, any questions. Let us know also. Are you a Star Wars or a Star Trek fan? Start a debate on the channel. But Eric, I know you wanted to share a story as soon as we got started. Do you want to kick us off?
Okay. The year is 2019. It's September. We are in Burlingame, California, near San Francisco. We're at an event called CloudyCon. Does anybody remember CloudyCon? More specifically, this was like the first event for FinOps, in my opinion. But we were taking a training given by Mr. Rob Martin himself. And I first met you in that class.
Yes.
And Steph, we went through the legendary fight size exercise between Rob and Kyle McLaughlin. You remember that?
Yeah.
Where I guess the new FinOps person took a printout of right size recommendations and handed it to the CFO. Not always a good thing to do. We survived the FinOps exam, the first one.
Oh my God, we're the first ever people to do that exam. I think I need to redo it.
And we survived it because it's definitely come a long way since then. And by the way, if you got your certification back then, it's time to renew. I found that out most recently. My actually expires right before FinOps X, so I need to go through the training and the certification process again.
I need to do the same thing.
Yeah, and just thinking about that class, like, from your perspective, what did you know about FinOps then? Like, what were you doing? I remember something about my notes, like Penny. Tell me about Penny.
Penny, my baby. I didn't even know if I was talking about Penny on this show. So I was running KPMG's FinOps at that point and had my idea of what FinOps was. And I think the training was really interesting to see like what other people were doing. That was one of the best bits about that because it was a very like collaborative conversation training. It's not just like you're studying from a book. And I think I was very happy. And I gave a talk at the event about the way that I'd approach FinOps. But I feel like, and the same as FinOps X, like if anyone's going, like check us. I'm assuming Eric are going. Yeah, we know this. I know. Yes. It was like being around so many people that actually cared about this subject was really interesting and hearing their ideas and their techniques. And yeah, I loved it. It was great, man.
Yes. And you know what? Fast forward to now. Back then in 2019, I don't know if you went to the FinOps Foundation, like not meetups, but the weekly or bi-weekly calls that they had, where it'd be JR and Mike Fuller talking with a few veterans. We had on the call. Nowadays, the summits that happen once a month, there are over 1,000 people here. So it's clearly crazy. FinOps is on the minds of everybody, especially right now as we head into some economic uncertainty.
Yeah. Which brings us to kind of, we've covered how we know each other, but Eric, let's make sure everyone knows who you actually are, because we're jumping straight in. So do you want to give us your 1-minute origin story?
Yeah, so my name is Eric Malarcher again. I work for a company called Boomi. I've been at Boomi since 2018, or actually 2017 at the very end. And I used to lead infrastructure operations, dealing with reliability, productivity, all with a very small team of like 6 people, I think we were at that time. And around 2019, right around CloudyCon, I paved a way for myself in Boomi to become the person responsible for FinOps at Boomi. And basically, we had some of the same issues where, hey, we can't tell what we're spending, and what is our cost of goods sold spend, and what is our R&D expense, and our budgets and predictions and forecasting were like 1,000% off. And I pitched that to leadership. We had a new ELT member come in as the head of engineering, and I was told to just go run with it. And here I am many years later, leading the FinOps team here, and we have things well buttoned down from a practice perspective.
Yeah.
And, a little bit about Boomi. Boomi is an integration platform as a service. We'll connect your business together. Say you're looking to collect data from one disparate system and build your own unit economics. You could use Boomi to collect data from multiple locations, streamline that data, and then present it to be visualized so you can track your easy unit economics.
Cool. Good to know. I feel like I just, especially with a lot of these conversations I have with people, I know more what they do rather than what the company does, and that's always a problem. So if you are sitting there listening and thinking, I want to be like Eric and Steph and carve your way into your own little niche of doing FinOps, and stick around for this episode. We're going to talk a lot about the kind of challenges that Eric's come across and the way that he's going to come through them. Starting off with, you mentioned you worked in the infrastructure area, but what made you get into the FinOps part of working in the business?
That's a great question. So it starts with our previous hosting provider back before we moved to AWS. I remember just going through the infrastructure and looking and saying, what is this? Are we still using this piece of infrastructure? And I went through maybe like 8 different hosts. And in talking with the engineering team, it was, no, we don't need those anymore. So I was like, oh, all right, let's get rid of them. So that started incrementing some cost savings that I hadn't really experienced before in my career. And my background is very data center centric. So I kind of latched onto that. And then as we moved into AWS, I really started to look at what we were doing and seeing if it was efficient or not. And for the most part, it was not. So looking for ways that we to optimize and become more efficient. And I was just drawn to that, just saving the company bottom line money. And even with like reservations, I remember the first time I bought an RI, I bought a Linux RI when I was supposed to buy a Red Hat RI. As you can imagine, I probably flipped out and freaked. And thankfully, AWS allowed me to cancel that and buy what I was actually looking to buy. But it's just ways to understand our usage, know what we're doing, and then start layering in those savings. And you'll see in a future presentation at FinOps X, I'll be talking about how our effective savings rate is actually baked into our goals for the year and how to measure that. So stay tuned. That's
great.
With cross-props.
Does it say something that I remember buying my first savings plan and not my first RI? Because I don't think I actually was in charge of buying RIs. I think I started to do I don't think I did them, and then savings plan came out, and then I was working on it. I was like, does that show my age that I focus more on savings plans than I do?
That is, and believe it or not, if you were buying savings plans, they're already expiring if you bought 3-year ones.
Yeah. So
it's hard to believe, but I was looking at that the other day. I'm like, oh.
KPMG, your savings plans are expiring.
Yes, KPMG, please go look. You better renew those if you need them.
So one other thing that you spoke about at the reInvent when we were hanging out before, you have a nickname, which I love. Please tell us your nickname story.
Yes, I am known as the Boomi Grinch. And lately I've been called the Monopoly Man by somebody else. So I kind of like that. It shows that we're really
going to go Boomi Grinch.
Names. But from a Grinch perspective, the story is this. Many years ago, I was looking at, well, we were part of Dell. And since we've been sold off from Dell, we're now owned by private equity. But we had a shutdown at the end of the year. So Dell would mandate off the last week. And typically what you'd find is people would take off like the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Right.
And I wanted the goal to be, there should be nothing in non-production running unless it's mission critical over the holidays. So I made a campaign across the board, working with all the engineers, looking in the console, making sure that there is nothing there. Like we literally turned off everything in non-production for about 2 weeks and saved an astronomical amount of money. After that, people were creating new emoticons in Slack for like every holiday, where you have like a Grinch in an army helmet, or a Grinch in like, Uncle Sam hat, right? So it stuck. It became the persona for myself here at Boomi. And it's stuck ever since. And we've changed, in terms of people. Like we've got a lot of new people around.
Yeah.
Some people from that time have moved on, of course. But for the most part, like the Grinch has stuck. And also, I tried to do like comparing dollars to like beer.
Yeah, great analogy. People love
back
that.
from CloudyCon when Spotify had talked about it.
Yes. And oh my God. Yes. I remember that talk. Yeah.
It didn't work at all. That was like a complete bust. Like nobody, really picked up on that. But every once in a while, people who remember from that long ago will still put like beer emoticons when we make announcements about how much we've saved. Right.
I love that. If you're listening and thinking like, you need to go and be the bad guy. Not too bad. Don't go to the dark side. Did you see the light? I've been waiting to use that. I got a new toy. I'll put it back to normal. But be the bad guy. Like I bet that the way you did it was like with a structured approach to you. One thing you said, I think, is like the best, like a small snippet was like, I worked with the engineering teams. And that is like a different way than saying I told the engineering teams.
Right.
There's a very different slant in the way that you're talking. And I think that's why it becomes like a more effective communication style, and you're going to get more things to happen if you're actually working with them, which is a big more. So could you tell us more about how you did that?
Sure. And I'm sure the engineers would say, you're telling me to do this at some times, but usually I have data. So I'll talk about a couple of collaboration approaches. What I've inserted myself into production engineering. So that's responsible for reliability. We have security kind of falling within that as well, engineering productivity. But I've learned to work with all those teams and the managers to build that relationship up where we can talk about opportunities. And more so, I'll get into the champions piece in a little bit as well. But, it took executive alignment at the top to be able to really get people to focus on optimizations that likely would have fallen by the wayside, or I'd have to fight with teams to get the priority to actually do it. But some of our conversations will be like, hey, look, here's a good example. I looked recently, a colleague of mine, Will, who's also presenting at FinOps X, and I were looking at CloudWatch logs, and we saw a big spike in CloudWatch logs, and also, oh, by the way, another little hit. If you haven't watched the presentation for Optimizing Other, please check it out. Steph and Yuri gave the presentation at this past reInvent, and
that's a great segue. We weren't recorded, it's heartbroken, but next season, I think it's like episode 4, we're coming back to do that. So tune us when and I'll come to it at the end of the show. But yeah, good shout. There's also a presentation on, sorry, I'm just proper hijacking what you just mentioned.
No, I hijacked myself.
I haven't plugged the show yet. But if on Keys on the YouTube channel, there is, if you go into the optimizing playlist, there is a shorter version of Optimizing the Others. So go and check that out. Sorry, continue, Eric.
Okay, so CloudWatch logs. We're humming around, and it's a pretty substantial expense that we have. So I'm like, Will, what is this? And especially when we saw a big spike in it. So we're trying to figure out, like, what is going on? So digging into the CloudWatch logs, we start looking. And what we found was basically 3 messages over and over and over again. It was set auto commit equals 0, roll back, and set auto commit equals 1. very valuable log messages.
So helpful. So helpful.
So, and not to mention, I looked at the retention. I'm like, oh, we're keeping these forever. Do we need to?
Just in case you ever think, what am I setting it to? 1 or 0?
1 or 0, but we're also going to roll it back too.
Yeah.
So it was clear that those messages for RDS were the most frequent. And we're like, what is going on? So we started digging into it with the engineering teams, and we got down to parameter configurations within RDS. And we started looking at what we were doing for the audit perspective. So we evaluated the different criteria, like I forget the name, like DML, DCL for querying. You could look it up in the audit for RDS. And we worked with AWS as well to figure out like what should we be doing here as a best practice. So we took that with the engineering team, made sense. We came up with a swag of what that would save, and it being a really easy change to put in place. We were able to measure it first in our non-production environments, and then we moved it into production. But we did it together, and in like the first 3 months, like it's like, the whole optimization for the year will probably be around 200 grand of savings just for set auto commit equals 0, roll back and set auto commit equals 1. So
that's astounding. And
it is. But, to turn the tables on you, how can you make that so easy for us
I know
to enable in the first place? So
because you can, it's like anything. It's like I always think this with things like retention of CloudWatch logs. People are like, well, why is it set to never expire? It's like, you don't want us to delete stuff for you. Like that's not what we're supposed to do. We're allowing you to do your own thing. And tip, if anyone has got their expire to never expire, when you create things, a lot of the time a CloudWatch log group will get created for you by Amazon. So like a Lambda function, it will auto do it, and it will auto do it to be never expire. If you create one yourself, Terraform, CloudFormation, whatever, you can set the retention to be whatever you want. And so someone said that to me recently, and I was like, oh, that's rather than write, I have a script that like runs through and changes all of them, but just create them yourself as a small thing. But just going into that a little bit more, when you are, so if someone's watching and they're like, oh, okay, I have a lot of CloudWatch spend. How did you find out it was from RDS specifically that it was pushing those logs?
So that's where we really dug into like what's the usage type, right?
Okay.
And then we got down to the level of like showing which bucket it was in. I think that's what it's called, or what log,
What log group, yeah, probably.
What log group it's in. Thank you. So when we tied it down to say, oh, this is RDS and this is the name of our database, and here's all the other databases, and here's the one in production and non-production, we were able to really dig in and then run the insights to see like what was actually happening in those log groups. And that is where we, basically the beginning of the optimization, right? We had the data now, and now we're able to take that data, collaborate with AWS and the engineers to identify that, look, we don't need to see this. Like this is 3 messages of nothing, right? It's useless. So we put it in place, and look, now we're getting some benefit from it already.
Yeah. I think again, like jumping on something small that you said that's really important, especially with things like CloudWatch, because people often, I think they see CloudWatch as like a spending cost explorer and forget to do that drill down and kind of think, oh, I'm spending much on CloudWatch, what do I do? And there's a process of saying, okay, well, what part of CloudWatch, because there's like 6 different sections to it. Okay, so it's a log, but what log group specifically? And then drilling deeper and deeper and not trying to bore the ocean, but like finding that actual cause. Before we kind of move on, we've got a question that I wanted to pop up. So thank you for the questions. Any more questions, please put them in the chat. What service is the most tricky to deal with in terms of FinOps? What would you go for?
Question. Let me think about that. So if you don't have good visibility into Kubernetes and you're running shared clusters, that could certainly be a challenge. But for us, not so much, but I can see how that could very well be. Let me think. So CloudWatch was a relatively straightforward one. I know there's going to be a good one that I can think about, but it's not.
I can go first. I'll say what mine is. Okay, so mine, I think, is EC2. Because
get out of here.
In terms of FinOps, so if you own your EC2s and it's your stuff, you can make the changes and you can optimize, right? But if you are from a FinOps point of view and you're pushing this message out of like, I can see that Amazon or whoever your cloud provider is saying to right size something, it's so hard to get that to actually happen because there are so many elements to actually making sure that it the right sizing is correct, that it's going to be the right sizing. It's got to go through dev, test, prod, and there's like it's way far. It's like quite hard to do. And don't get me wrong, the rewards are great, but you have to spend a lot of work on them. So I think it's the most tricky. If I'm going down to the wording of the question, I think it's the trickiest to actually make it work.
That's interesting, Steph. So now that you mention it like that, I can definitely agree. It's like, oh yeah, so in production, we could cut our production servers down a little bit in size, but then we kind of put performance at a risk. So it's like the fine balance of making sure that you're going to have that performance, but you're going to do it from the most cost efficient way. So yeah, that's definitely a challenge and something that I've dealt with here, working with engineers where they look at it and they're like, that's a little risky. Plus, we might have to re-upsize it, really soon anyways. So is it really worth the effort? So yeah it's a two-way street, two-way conversation.
Effort into it is always that big thing. And so a lot of the time I probably controversial is I don't always start with EC2. I kind of avoid it because I think that especially the teams I've been to speak to a lot of FinOps teams, and I'm like, okay, let's go for like, if you want to be able to quick wins, let's find stuff that's like idle and do the low-hanging fruit first, and then bringing it back to that engineer conversation, they really have to be involved and introduced into this world of optimization. Because you mentioned earlier champions as being a way to maybe do that. Have you done that a lot, Boomi?
Yeah, we've begun to roll out a champions program. One of the best champions that we have is his name is Jackie. He's from our API management team. And he's really taken to how they're using especially in non-production environments. He's basically cut their spend in half just by looking at what they're doing, making sure that they're using instance sizes that are appropriate for non-production workloads, where possible, leverage EFS because we use a lot of NetApp on tap. And we're also looking to use like EFS or more low-cost storage for files within our non-production environments. And he's made a great, he's a great example of how if you're paying attention and looking at what you're doing, you can really make an impact to the bottom line. And also shutting things off on nights and weekends. He's been following using different tags to turn things off in different schedules, which is awesome. So I'd like to call him out, and I hope he's listening right now.
Yeah, we'll tag him in the video. That's great. So going back onto the engineering part, because I do think it's a really interesting and very topical conversation these days. So we spoke about kind of getting them involved. Is there anything else that you do with kind of making sure that they can see their own data, or you're working with them to do this kind of work?
Yeah, so we also worked with each of the teams, especially the leaders, to set budgets. So we use a third-party tool, which is called Apptio Cloudability, available through the AWS Marketplace, just like Boomi is. We have worked with those teams to set up budgets that they're following for this year. So they get mail outs, they get Slack messages put into their Slack on a weekly basis. What is their usage? What are the top stacks? What are the changes from this week compared to last week? So, and of course, where they're going to land from a budget perspective. So I've had leaders reach out to me recently like, hey, it's showing me that it's probably going to be a couple $100 over budget. And the budget is thousands of dollars. So it's not that big of a deal most recently. But it's what they're doing is having the conversation with me to talk about like, is this healthy or not? Is this a good business decision? Are you using the resources properly? Do we need to make an adjustment? Are you working on something new that's going to be adding value? Or is it just, it's this fourth day of the month. Is it just not accurate yet from a, estimation, perspective? So the point is, absolutely talk with the leaders, work with them, set budgets, talk to the engineers, insert yourself into the processes. Yesterday, we were having a conversation about team environments and how many team environments are there going to be and how are they being used? And what's the way to do it from a cost-efficient perspective? But the point is, talk early, talk often, and call out people when they do good. They really do appreciate that. I try not to use the stick of saying, "Hey, here's who's not doing good." I don't ever do that. I'll call you out if you're doing good only, and then talk to you behind the scenes if there's some area of opportunity to improve.
Yeah, definitely. The idea of it is one of those things. I've heard other companies, they can do a more like, you're doing a bad job, like approach. I think it depends on the vibe of the company. Sometimes what's going to work well. It depends how bad the situation is as well. So if you really have to be like, we have to get this done. I think I tell the story of there used to be like a 7 a.m. call that the manager had to sit on to tell them off for not doing security patching because we'd like had a problem or something, and that was because they had to do it and it was like the only way. But if you're trying to promote FinOps as a way forward, yeah, the kind of carrot is a much better way. I can't believe you forgot it's May the 4th. We've been through this.
May the 4th, we've been through this.
We've been through this. Stay there, Grogu. Any Grogu fans, put it in the chat. So I've got another question for you. So piggybacking off the on the question about RDS, which service has the best short-term ROI, long-term ROI, excluding RIs and SPs from FinOps practices?
I had somebody who migrated out of using Aurora RDS on Postgres into serverless, and they literally were able to use only what they needed. And that made them, I mean, not only are they using that, but they're also using EKS with auto scaling. So they're able to scale up and scale down, but it really cut their expense compared to what they were before. Like they were, they're buying bigger instances. And then, obviously we would reserve those. So if we didn't have that anymore, they were able to literally just scale up and scale down across the board on their tech stack. So it's definitely one to throw out there if you're looking to grow and shrink with client demand.
Yeah, definitely. I think going off serverless, continuing that is that you forget how many services can be serverless. So it's like a weird tongue twister. And I think we were talking about this with just forgetting. People just think it's Lambda, but there's so many other aspects to it that you can migrate to that allows people to build for the cloud. And that's really, I think, that concept is really important, and moving more away from your static stuff. I think it's definitely the best way of doing it. Good shout for the serverless.
Yeah, same thing with again, serverless or managed service. We use a lot of OpenSearch. We used to run our own Elasticsearch clusters, and we were constantly spending time care and feeding, patching them, fixing it when it was down, so on and so forth. But OpenSearch really changed our life in that regard, where we were able to not really look at the infrastructure so much anymore and just focus on adding that customer value versus operational overhead.
Awesome. Oh, 1 point. AWS on air. We are on air. Welcome. Hope you're enjoying yourself. Hope you have a good day. So we have literally 3 minutes left. Quick touch on, you mentioned the business a couple of times. Do you just want to give us a quick sneak into how you communicate to the business about optimization?
Yeah. So with engineers, so first off, we have a commitment of saving a certain amount of money this year. So that is in the front and center all the time. Like that is one of our top priorities. So tracking those optimizations and how much we're saving versus that number is the biggest thing. And that goes out to all of the executive leadership. We put it in, we do like quarter business or QBRs, or at least we were doing QBRs, where we would track all that and put it out in a format that is digestible via slides. Second, we do track business unit economics as well. Again, this goes up to the executive staff, where we'll track our cost per customer. We have a couple different products. So one, we store golden records. So what is our cost per golden record? What is our cost per flow launch for one of our other products? Our cost per attachment for some of our processes, our multi-tenant clouds that are running. We track these on a quarterly basis to showcase how we're doing. Are we growing in terms of users, and are we shrinking in terms of spend, or at least staying stable? So those are definitely ones that we call out.
Great. Awesome. All right. Thank you so much. I feel like we need to have you back on because there's so much more to dive into. So
glad to come back on. Sure, anytime.
Yeah, definitely. So so this is actually the last episode of season 6. So thank you for being on our May the 4th episode. We're back on the 1st of June with all the optimization you could want. We're focusing on season 7, all about optimizing actual services. So if you're looking to save money, that is going to be the season to check out heavily. Also, in the meantime, if you are wanting to get some more FinOps in your life, there is a 24-hour stream happening on this channel next week. I'm going to be hosting some of the EMEA sessions, so come check it out. I'll share it on LinkedIn as well. But yeah, that's going to be an exciting time. Thank you so much for being here, Eric. Thank you so much for
Thank
watching.
you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. And we will see
May
you
the
guys
fourth
next
be
time.
with you.
Bye.